Tune into the final take with MK Mariner every Saturday on the Alcamba Times and experience extensive conversations on a variety of topics, including national and international headlines, breaking issues, and major developments in politics, business, innovation, science, and sports, along with inspiring stories and expert analysis to provide a comprehensive understanding of the news.
Hello and warm welcome to this special edition of the Final Take, exploring the Gambia's journey through 60 years of nationhood as the country marks 6 decades of sovereignty. I am Seni Maren and welcome back. Now the Gambia is 60 years old today, marking a landmark diamond jubilee of the nation's independence since gaining sovereignty from the colonial Britain in February 1965. The journey from those days of liberation struggle that inspired the nation's founding fathers to action culminates in a viable country of 2 million united in a resolute quest to attain shared goal for peace, progress, and prosperity. As the Gambia celebrates its 60th independent anniversary, the lofty ideas that share the nation's struggle for self-governance still remain sound and alive, with citizens focused on building strong institutions from the gain that inspires 60 years of self-determination. Now, amid changing global order and new challenges affecting sovereign nations, what is the way forward for Gambia as it reaches a critical cornerstone? Today, we are gathered here to discuss an important question: where we are as a country and where we are headed. As we reflect on our journey, we take this opportunity to engage with our distinguished panel of guests who will share their diverse perspective and insight from their respective fields. Joining me live on this special program is Hassum Sise, a distinguished historian and director of National Center for Arts and Culture. He is joining us today live from Banjul. With his extensive knowledge of the Gambian history, he will share his thought on our nation's cultural evolution over the past 60 years. Hassum will later join us in the show. We will also be joined by Ms. Fatou Senghor, a prominent women rights activist and a former director of Article 19 International. Fatou is currently the founder for the Center for Women's Rights and Leadership. And then she is a tireless champion for women's rights and gender equality in the Gambia. She will share her vision for the empowerment of women in our society and the progress made over the years. We are also honored to have Dr. Suleiman Jai, a notable political scientist and policy analyst, who is currently in the United States. He will join us from Dallas. Suleiman will share his perspective on the political landscape of the Gambia, highlighting key challenges and opportunities as we celebrate this important milestone. Our next guest is Ndeye Jobate, a prominent Gambian political activist based in Norway. Ndeye has been an outspoken advocate for social justice and activism in shaping the future of the Gambia, particularly from the perspective of the diaspora. Many thanks for joining us. I am your host, Seni MK Marina. We will return after this quick
Tune into the final take with MK Mariner every Saturday on the Alcamba Times and experience extensive conversations on a variety of topics, including national and international headlines, breaking issues, and major developments in politics, business, innovation, science, and sports, along with inspiring stories and expert analysis to provide a comprehensive understanding of the news.
Many thanks for those joining us. This is the final take, a special Gambia at 60 independent anniversary celebration. We have a very rich panel of guests on this important show. We look forward to a rich discussion exploring our past while envisioning the future of the Gambia. Stay with us as we delve into the vital conversation and celebrate our journey together. Hassum should be our first guest, but unfortunately, he will join us later in the show. We will go straight to Dr. Suleiman Jai, political scientist and analyst. Suleiman, let's begin with you. In your view, how has the Gambia political landscape changed since independence in 1965?
Thank you, Sene. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I think it has changed a lot. And in some cases, it hasn't changed a lot at all. Because if you look at it, where we were at independence, right? I was reading Jawara's book while I was in the Gambia. I went to, what's it called? I went to Timbuktu to get a bunch of books on the Gambia. And I was reading Jawara's book for the third time. And it really dawned on me that the Gambia was not ready for independence. And I think there were a lot of talk about Gambia merging with Senegal at some point. But I think Jawara's argument was simple, right? We have, self-determination was important and self-rule was important. But if you look at the post-independence Gambia, you realize that the Gambia was not ready. You look at, the Berkeley Rice book, and I think you're familiar with that book. It's that pejorative, very paternalistic, basically talking about how the country wasn't ready. And I read Ismail Abaji's piece this morning. The first thing in the morning I read was his piece on independence we seek is not ceremonial, it's economical. The reason why I said our politics hasn't changed that much is because since independence, whenever we think of independence, we're talking about the pageantry, the pomp, the parties, right? The past matches and that kind of stuff. But I think sometimes we need to just take a step back and reflect on where we are, where we were and where we are. Is the Gambian better off today than they were at independence? If we have a poll to ask Gambians to return back to Britain, for the British monarchy to rule over the Gambia again, I'm sure many Gambians would basically take that step and basically agree that we should go back to Britain, which is sad, but that is also the failures of actually politics, Gambian politics, right? I think when we think of politics, we look at just democracy. Democracy basically means the tyranny of the majority. Democracy does not guarantee economic development or anything. It's just a political process, right? And I think the Cold War mentality really kind of affected the way we looked at systems of government, right? Because we conflated capitalism and democracy as though these are the same things, and also as though socialism, communism, all those confusing terminologies. And up to date, our first president was democratically elected. Barrow is democratically elected. Where did that take us? Not far. So the question is, as Gambians, do we really need the state? I know it's a radical question to ask, but what is the role of the state? What is the essence of the state? Why do we need the Gambian state? What does the Gambian state actually do for anybody in the Gambia? Because if you look at all of the metrics, Gambia is a failed state. It's not any different from most countries in Africa who got independence. I can give you an example. The islands in the Comoros archipelago, which is Comoros and Mayotte and those islands, they sought and got their independence from France. One of the islands, Mayotte, decided to stay under France. And what happens today? What is happening today right now? People from Mayotte are trying to people from the Comoros Islands are trying to get into Mayotte, because why? Because Mayotte is part of France and Mayotte is more stable than the Comoros Islands. So, and again, these countries, they were not invented. None of them were invented to be nation states. So the nation state basically failed Africa, right? So when the British took control of what is today Gambia, they did not create the land what we have today, the political entity, as though it was going to be a state at some point. That was never part of their thinking. But now today, we sought independence and got it. And what you realize is that turning artificial states, artificial entities into viable nation state is a very slow and organizing process. And that is literally what we are faced with today.
So Suleiman, to you, Gambia is not politically independent from your perspective, looking at its journey from 1965 to 2025, 60 years exactly.
I would say politically, maybe we are to a point, but not fully, right? Because we're still at the mercy of Senegal to even protect us, right? We're not really a sovereign country. And economically, even if you look at just post-independence, what happened? At independence, we were getting gifts from other countries, right? Senegal gave us bags of rice, other countries gave us a lot of different stuff. And what you realize after independence was that we had a lot of budget support, and we still do. We're not independent. I mean, in our thinking, we would think we're independent. And For many Gambians, independence is not about being a sovereign state. Independence is a one-day thing when you go to the the Independence Stadium and dance and celebrate. But no, we're not, and we're not unique in this situation. We're not. Many of our African counterparts are in the same situation. These are not really politically or economically independent entities because they were never invented to be that. And I think since independence, we have actually failed. Self-rule has been an absolute catastrophe for our people. Just look at what's happening right now with USAID pulling out of many of these countries. Many of these countries are going to go the way of Sri Lanka very soon because these countries are not actually serious political.
They are dependent countries.
They are, many of them, right? Just look at what is going on across the continent right now with just USAID pulling out, right? Because again, these countries are not independent countries, right? It's independent in name only, but not in practical terms, right? We depend on basically countries for everything. If you look at Gambia, we consume everything, but we don't produce a lot. We are actually one of the most dependent countries in the world. We're dependent on other countries for basically everything, right? Even our budget, we're waiting for budget support to basically do basic stuff that we need to do for the people.
Absolutely. Suleiman, we'll come back to you. Fatou Jan Senghor, the founder of the Center for Women Empowerment and Development. I will come to you right now. Auntie Fatou, tell us, how would you assess the progress made in women's rights and gender equality in the Gambia since 1965? As someone who has been involved in a women empowerment initiative, media freedom, freedom of expression, you name it. Tell us about, your assessment of the progress made in women's rights and gender equality in the Gambia since 1965.
Thank you very much, MK, and happy Diamond Jubilee. I hope, we all take stock. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you for this special day. Suleiman mentioned something very important, and I think 60 years down the line, we're still debating if we are a country, we should be, independent. But I think we move past that. The problem, I believe, that we have not been creative enough, really, to leverage on the things that we have. When Gambia was to gain independence, obviously a lot of doubt, arose. Many people said, Gambia was not a viable state for the reason he mentioned, our size, the lack of resources. And when we talk about the lack of resources, it was not only economic, but also human resources. Most of the positions were manned by most of the foreigners, especially during the colonial times, when we all know that the Gambia was also managed not directly here, but also, through different phases. So what I believe is that, like many other countries, of course, the demarcation, from Berlin had a lot of consequences. And when we were taking our independence, I think our leaders then wanted all to be on their own. They didn't look into the bigger picture. I think there was some discussions on the continent on how to bring some of the countries together. Most of those initiatives failed. We've seen what happened with the Federation of Mali. We've seen some other initiatives in the region that couldn't hold. And maybe I think the question we should ask, why is it that we didn't manage, as countries or as entities, after the end of the colonization, because we all had the same vision. The Pan-Africanism was very vibrant around that time. Why was it that we couldn't agree to move together instead of, moving with all these tiny, countries, entities, I would say, that, had a lot of challenges in terms of surviving. So just to say that, yes, there've been attempts to correct. Maybe approach wrong, I think was wrong. We had the Senegambia Confederation, which didn't, hold for long. we need to learn from those lessons. I think also when you look at ECOWAS, this year ECOWAS is going to have 50 years. I think the why ECOWAS also came into being was also to address some of those challenges, especially economic challenges, and try to integrate our economies, ensuring that, there's free movement of people, and ultimately really to correct some of those issues that Suleiman mentioned rightly, that, we were in silo, we couldn't manage our own economy, we were supported across the board. And most countries, including even some of these other countries that are kind of bigger than us, they're all supported budgetary. They all receive budget support. And we ask ourselves, are we really sovereign? Are we really independent when you cannot, through your own internal resources, fund your own budget? So I think these are the things that we need to ask. And it's not unique to Gambia. Our situation is very peculiar, though, because we don't have a lot of resources like many other countries in the region. We don't have a lot of minerals. We don't have a lot of resources that many other countries have. But I believe we do have certain resources that we are not leveraging on. And one of them is our human resources. We were very limited at independence, but I think with years, through different supports from international partners, countries, I think we managed to educate our people. It was not across the board until we got, more higher learning institutions. But I think as we move, we realize that, Gambians are more and more educated. And I think what I realize is that we're not leveraging, on our human resources. So that is something that we need also to underscore and to look into. Now, coming to the human rights issues, I don't want to separate human rights, I want to link it to the human rights issues, because I think it's very important. And if you look at Gambia, from independence in the 80s and in the 70s and 80s, Gambia has made a lot of strides in terms of really shaping the international architecture on human rights, especially the African system. It's not by chance that we call the African Charter the Banjul Charter. But I think the missing link is that most of those efforts were done regionally, but internally, there have not been lots of reforms in terms of women's rights. You've seen that we have the African Charter, we have the African Commission based in the Gambia. But when you look at really the Gambia's kind of legal system, it was really not favorable to women's rights. And then it's only with time that we've started to see some changes in terms of the enactment of the Women's Act. But still, we are really, really, really lacking. One thing that I want to say, that at independence, we've seen in the delegation, there was only one woman. As we speak today, how many women do we have in representative position? How many women do we have in some of the public institutions? I think when we do the analysis, we realize that we made a little progress, but the progress is not significant when it comes to really women's rights. We have more women educated. We have slightly some, here and there, some representation, but I think the country has never prioritized women's rights as, as a major component of the human rights kind of standards that we has been working on, especially during Jawara and at the end of the Yahya Jammeh's regime. This government also is very slow in really, bringing its act together when it comes to women's rights.
Madam Jan, before I move to Suleiman on my next question, you touch a very key information here with regards to how women, are sidelined in terms of decision making. We are 60 years old today. Going forward, what kind of Gambia do you want to see in terms of women empowerment, in women and women political representation? Because it's 60 years, not 60 days. Still, women are lacking behind in decision making. Where do you want to see Gambia going forward 60 years on today?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot. I believe we need a deliberate effort in terms of the normative framework. You need to change the laws, because it's good to talk about it. It's good to leave it to politicians. Unless you change the laws, you will not be able to act. So I believe that we need to get laws that will, make it compulsory for public institutions and to some extent private institutions to have adequate representation. And in most cases around the world, it's only through legislation and legislative intervention that we've seen these corrected. So we need affirmative action for women in terms of legislation. The other important thing also, we need to look at it, because you have to understand that there's a big interface between what is happening in the private sphere and what is happening in the public sphere. If women are not empowered and are not protected within the families, within the private sphere, in terms of their workplaces, in terms of their family, against violence, against other abuses, it will be very difficult for them to stand in the public space. We are very happy to celebrate that as we speak, at the conclusion of this African Union, there is a convention against, on violence against women. We hope that this will be transposed into our national legislation. So that is one thing. You need to have a deliberate action to ensure that you have, not only just for mere sake of representation, to some of the injustices, and to make sure that you have mechanisms that will monitor, that will support women in their private and in their workplaces, so that they will not be, victims of violence, but also if they are violence, at least there are corrective measures. The other one, which is very important, is economic empowerment. If women are not economically empowered, if women do not have the resources and the independence necessary, it will be very difficult for them to stand. They will be in the political parties. If they don't have the resources, they cannot sponsor themselves, they cannot get sponsored, they will be just there at the mercy of political leaders, at the mercy of businesses who may decide, at whim, to get them to represent or not. So only men who have means or who have connections will be candidates, and we've seen it. And in our society, it's very difficult for women to go start fundraising in like men can do, because it has a lot of risk in terms of being harassed sexually, being labeled to certain ways. So women are very, very also limited in terms of what they can do in our society. So that is why these three steps are very important: legislative intervention, and also ensuring that all the mechanisms are in place in workplaces, in the private sphere, to address some of these injustices. But lastly, importantly, to ensure that there are mechanisms to enable women to have more income, more access to land, more access to credit, and also to have some actions or some measures to enable them also to be supported in business. I give you one example. If you go to the banks and try to get a loan, they'll ask you for things that most women will not have, except maybe very few who are in the market. In most families, some of the title deeds that are held by men, women contribute to the families, but their contribution sometimes is not seen, because they contribute on the daily, running of the household, but the men will purchase some of the bigger things that will have title, that are visible. And when it comes to now doing business, it's very difficult for a woman to go to a bank and request and ask for a loan, because she doesn't have like a collateral that will help her. And these are things that in many countries they are looking into, to ensure that they facilitate access to loan, access to credit, but also access to land and productive means, so that women can be empowered. Because I don't believe in political empowerment alone. If you are not economically independent, you cannot stand in our society. So women must be independent financially, economically, to be able to be on their own and aspire for political and other leadership positions.
Yeah, I agree with you. Women have to be economically empowered. Political empowerment is not the only solution. You can be politically empowered, but economically, if we are not, it will be difficult for you to attain your full potential. Thank you very much, Fat Jan Senghor, for that brilliant synopsis about the women political representation. Coming to Dr. Suleiman Njai. Dr. Njai, what key political challenges does the Gambia face as it celebrates its Diamond Jubilee, and how can they be addressed going forward?
Yeah, before I answer the question, I just want to go back to what Madam Jan said about economic independence for Gambian women. I also think that that could be a double-edged sword too, like for the economic part. So when I was doing my research in the Gambia, I spent years in the Gambia looking at the microfinance projects in rural Gambia. One of the things I realized in the rural settings is that the moment the woman becomes more independent, it gives the man a free rein to basically marry another woman, because that means they're not fully responsible for that one. So in a conservative society like Gambia, some of these things can be challenges. But I also think even in the political sphere as well, Gambia is still a very conservative society, right? Just last year, there was a bill that was put forward basically to bring back FGM, right? And those conversations, if we have a plebiscite, like a referendum or something, many Gambians probably would have voted for that. I'm not even sure that the politicians representing the people really represented the people in that they were basically representing their voices. But in terms of our politics, where the politics is today is not where our problems are. Gambian politics is mostly is very noisy, right? I can just ask anybody a simple question in the Gambia. What is Barrow's economic ideas? What are Usain Dabo's? None of them, no Gambian can even tell you, because they don't have any. I'm sorry. They might put this stuff online. Someone could. But really, these are not political parties that are actually trying to change the lives and livelihoods of the people. They're just in it for power for the sake of it. When I read Jawara's book, I realized the depth he had. You could disagree with him. You could also say that he really did not, his vision did not materialize. But Jawara was a serious person. When you read the book, you realize he had depth. You read some of the politicians of that time. You understand how brilliant these people were, right? And the ideas they had. We don't have that in our politics today. It's all about mudslinging. It's about people being online, insulting each other. It's basically the politics of basically, I'm doing this, you're not doing that, instead of basically what are they offering the people. So our politics actually, for lack of a better phraseology, it's really actually, it went down. It's not high quality. It's very low quality politics, right? There is really no ideas, right? I'm not seeing anything. And I'm not saying that every politician should have certain kind of ideas to move the country forward. But when I look at our politics, our focus is very focused on human rights, this, democracy that, which is fine. But then what happens to the masses? Democracy is not going to yield you. There's no guarantee that democracy is going to give you, a good economic plan. It's going to uplift everyone out of poverty. Democracy is good in a way that it gives representation, right? It's a tyranny of the majority. That's what democracy is. But then what about the economic aspect? Like the Gambian today is not better off than they were 15 years ago. They're not better off than they were 30 years ago. They're not better off. There might be in some cases where we have the remittance economy and that kind of changed the way people live in the country. But that's not because of the result of the state. The state, for the most part, has failed. And the politicians, either in the government or in the opposition, are not offering anything. I'm sorry, they're really not. They haven't offered us anything. I cannot hear anything that they've offered that is actually tangible and serious in a way that's going to change the lives of the people.
So yes, the politicians have their share of the blame. Looking at our situation 60 years on. So, but in your own opinion, how can we address these challenges looking forward? 60 years on right now.
And I think that's the hard question. That's the hard question to answer, right? Because there's no silver bullet to our problems, right? And I think many political scientists, what they try to do is to basically give you an answer that there's an answer, there's a solution. I'm not even sure we have a real solution to our political problem, right? We're learning that in the United States too, right? With the advent of social media, right? Politics become a sport. Right? It becomes a sport where it's about fighting, it's about mudslinging. It's really not about ideas anymore. And I think that is where we are in the Gambia. And the people who are voting in these people are not any different from the people they're voting for, right? We have to understand that too. Because the people are not a deviation from their leaders and vice versa. They're an absolute and necessary expression of it. So these are the people they're representing. They have no problems with these people representing them. So unless we invent new human beings in the country, a new electorate, a new citizenry, I'm not really sure we have actual answers to some of these problems. However, though, there are certain things we can do. We can hold them accountable, ask the hard questions, and it doesn't matter who it is, whether they're in government or not. As long as they're politicians vying for power, we need to ask them the hard questions. We need to challenge them, push them to actually make things better, because democracy is not only about voting. Beyond the voting, then what happens? What happens is very important in that space. Who do you hold accountable? How do you hold them accountable? How do you petition the state to do things the right way? You don't just wait for election after election. That is okay in a parliamentarian system where you can have a vote of no confidence. In our political system, we have our major elections every 4 or 5 years or so, right? And then every 5 years. And then it's the same thing. We have the parliamentary elections at the same time, right? So you cannot wait for 5 years before you actually start petitioning the state, petitioning your government, petitioning your politicians to actually do things on your behalf. And I think most Gambians are actually kind of divorced from that. The only things, again, we talk about is the political, like as in the democracy, human rights. We whine about those things, but we don't even do anything about it, right? So we have people who are outside the government pushing for that. But the majority of people don't care because they're thinking about the next meal. So until and unless we fix the economic problem, the political stuff is going to be hard to fix. You know, this takes me back to Samuel Huntington. In his book, what was the book's name again? This was written in the right before independence, around that time. And his argument in that book was that to have viable states, they have to actually have some organized social and political systems first before you move into the next stage. And I think in many African countries, we failed to do that. The economic core was never there. So basically, we jump from basically being vassals or being colonies of other countries to basically becoming independent entities without answering the economic questions themselves. And I think that is where we are today in the Gambia.
Okay. Many thanks, Suleiman, for that brilliant expose. Coming to Fatou Jan Sangor, I think my other guests will soon join us, but wherever you are watching, this is Independent Special Gambia at 60. In the studio with me is Dr. Suleiman Jai, a political scientist and policy analyst based in the United States. And also in the studio is lawyer Fatou Jan Sangor, the former director of Article 19 and a women rights advocate. Fatou, how can organizations like the Center for Women Rights and Leadership further promote women empowerment in the current political climate in the country?
Thank you. Saul mentioned a very important thing. I want to just maybe say one or two things before I get to your point. Yes, of course, we don't eat democracy. I think there's a lot of debate and a lot of questioning, especially in today's world with the rise of extremism, with all these big syndrome. I think there is a tendency to question the foundation of democracy. And when we look at our own context, I will not, dwell a lot on it because, discussing with a political scientist like him, so I will not go into. But to say that, at independence, most of African governments said, we don't want, democracy, human rights. We want to unite our people and we want to work towards economic, development and economic prosperity. 30 years down the line, in the 90s, what we realized that there were lots of, military regimes, dictatorship, one-party states, and all the promises, post-independent promises, except few countries. Gambia used to be among them, Senegal, Cape Verde, but Botswana, but few countries were really, really allowing their citizens to have a say. And I believe that one of our predicament and why we failed our post-independence also was that we didn't allow citizens to be part, of the development process. We have the elite, the post-colonial elite, who really, in most cases, perpetuated self-rule, perpetuated, you left all this draconian legislation to be used against the people. So I just believe that this is something that we need to put on record to say, yes, democracy will not solve all problems, But I do believe that, respect for democracy, respect for the rule of law can be really a good protection against tyranny, a good protection. And what we need, in fact, is that proper checks and balances. I agree with him. We pay lip service to most of this. Like we say, okay, let's have elections. Election is a barometer, but it's just one of the barometers for democracy. You need to have a proper social contract. When you have election and you don't deliver public service and you don't provide some of the other things, I believe that you cannot be called like a sovereign state. A sovereign state, has, certain rules. If you are a sovereign state, you need to provide security, you need to provide at least the conducive environment to regulations, mechanism to ensure that business can thrive, people can, take initiatives to enter, and Gambia has been a laissez-faire country for many years. We have never had a system that was regulated in a way to fix prices and all. But what we've seen over time is a system that is accelerated by few, a system that is so unregulated. Today, do we have antitrust laws? Do we have proper regulation for certain sectors? Do we have consumer protections? I think these are issues that are making things difficult for citizens to really assert their right, including women. Today, you look at the system, you have some institutions that are supposed to regulate, but they're not independent. They're not independent. And they cannot regulate the sectors, they are supposed to regulate. And also political interference in those mechanisms, I think also is a problem. And in most African countries, that's what we've seen. Yes, when the international, pressure comes to say, oh, you need to deregulate this sector, you need to, to set up this kind of mechanism, many countries will just run and start setting up those mechanisms, like they ticking boxes. But when we go into details, you realize that most of those institutions are not serving the real purpose. And I think this is something that we need to look. For example, you have an anti-competition commission. Do you know what they do? How they regulate, the businesses in the country to ensure that there is no monopoly, there is no, abuse of dominant position. I think there are so many areas where we are lacking, and I think this is not affecting only men or businesses. It affects also small businesses that are run by women. So today, you want to enter into certain markets as as a small entrepreneur, you cannot. You need to have a patron. You need to do certain things, and most women cannot do those. As I said, because of our society, because the way things are, you realize that women are confined into doing small businesses that are not very productive, and the few that are thriving, you count them, and they cannot make the difference unless we have legislation and deliberate action to say that these mechanisms that we are putting in place must be independent, but importantly also they cannot be just gender neutral. They have to look into the different categories of society, the vulnerable communities, those who have been disadvantaged for many years, and also people with, women and people with disabilities. And once you do that, then you set up mechanisms, then they can serve a purpose. So in a nutshell, to say, yes, I agree that democracy itself, at least, the way we are seeing it in our countries will not help us to develop. But also, I'm very scared these days because most countries, especially those who are trying to really take us back, or are criticizing the democratic rules. In as much as democracy is, at least it enables people to have a say. Now, that say is limited, and I agree.
So Fatou, let me before you move forward, let me ask you this quickly. Do you think that our system was, deliberately designed to marginalize women? Because when you look at our struggle for independence, during independence, it was only one woman who was part of the independent movement, that went to Marlborough to, fight for our. So 60 years on, women are still marginalized. Do you think this is a deliberate attempt, institutionalized attempt to marginalize women since independence 60 years on today?
Well, I will not say like deliberate, but we are not deliberate in changing the status quo. We are not deliberate in changing things. And I believe, when you have a comfortable situation, you believe that a situation is in your favor, you have no interest in changing it. So what I believe is that we need the leadership that is transformational, a leadership that will see that inclusion of women is part of the development process. And I think that big vision that we need, going forward, we didn't have it. Saul mentioned our first president, he was a visionary. I think he worked with the means also. At that time, also, society was very kind of conservative. There were few women who were really part of, and there were few women who were educated, and the few who were in the government, well, but they were very, very few. But did they to change things? I can see few areas where they were deliberate attempt to change things. And I believe now, looking back at the situation, maybe he didn't want to rock the boat, but he did some certain things that were kind of interesting in terms of housing, for example. Sometimes you may say, well, maybe it's a donor kind of driven situation, or he was influenced by some of the Nordics. When you look at the social security initial programs, you look at the Bakote estate, you look at even the Canifing, in those places, it was very, 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 modest civil servant or women working in the private sector. Most of the household, most of the owners are women. And I think that was very avant-gardist. That was very, very unique compared to even many other countries where women were not, owners of housing. So I think that was maybe in terms of the economy, in terms of some of the other things, he was trying to correct some of the injustices based on the fact that most women will contribute to the household at the end of the year. At the end of the day, when there is a conflict or when the man pass, they lose everything. So I think we can see that economically, there were some attempts to correct. But I believe that those isolated acts will not make a difference in a country unless you are deliberate and you champion. And I think what we have not gotten in this country, leaders who champion openly the women agenda and the equality agenda. It has consequences for election. It has consequences in the communities. But I believe that, our communities are very aware these days. If you talk to them, if you try and push and work with them, they will understand that equality is the order of the day, because in all those communities, you see that they are sending their girls to school now. Before, it was not the case. So I believe that for me, we have not yet gotten the leader that will really see the women agenda as a priority. Yes, I think I think that's a problem. Now, going forward, we need to demand it, and we need to vote and elect more women, and also encourage whoever is going to be at the head, of our institutions to have this agenda. So using those barometers to elect men and also bring more women, but women also who are interested in women's agenda, because we just don't want women who are also there to push for conservative agendas. And we've seen it during the FGM debate. There are women who were more even, adamant and who are pushing for FGM to come back. So we just don't want also women who will take us back. We want women who will make the Gambian, girls, the Gambian women agenda progress better than women who will just be, on the sitting on the fence.
Thank you. I think connection challenges with Fatou Jan Senghor. Are you there, Madam Senghor?
Yes, I'm there. Yeah, I as I said at the very beginning, we need to be deliberate, through the leadership, but we need also to have champions, both men and women. We need to ensure that those who are going to be elected in the next cycle will have this, as part of their priority. We cannot continue as we are going.
Okay. Many thanks for that explanation, Fatu Jan Sangor. Dr. Suleiman, coming back to you, I like to, give you more political questions because that's an area you are so much passionate about. Looking ahead, what are the prospects for democratic governance in the Gambia over the next decade?
Yeah, and before I answer that, I just want to touch on a few things that Madam Senghor said about demanding rights, right? In the political sphere, you don't beg for rights, you demand your rights, right? And I think people like her are doing that. But I think she also mentioned something that's important. Like during the FGM debate, there are a lot of women who were pro-FGM. And I think, to be honest, though, they probably represent the majority of Gambians. And we're fighting an uphill battle because if you have a society where people are convinced that, where women are convinced that their route to heaven is how they worship their husbands, is how dedicated they are towards their husband, it's really hard to crack that kind of like to just get through the noise, right? And convince people otherwise, right? Gambia is still a very conservative society. It is still very conservative. And in Gambian conservatism, the gender parity is there, right? We have this, the gender hierarchy is still there. So I think people like Madam Senghor, they have their work cut out for them because, man, it's hard. It's really hard to have certain conversations with people. And your question is the prospects, like what does the future hold for Gambian politics or what was the
democratic governance?
Yeah, I mean, democracy is not a destination. It's a process. And I think we are in that process right now of, because again, think about it. Jawara was in power for more than 30 years. And I think people forget that, right? Jawara didn't just come at independence. He was the leader of pre-independence Gambia too, right? So we had a very democratic system. Well, not very, but Jawara's government was democratic. It was democratic to as best as democracy was possible at that time. But it really did not yield anything beyond that. It just gave us some of those systems and structures to build on. For 32 years or so, Jawara was there. Jammeh came and basically dismantled that system. And I think to Barrow's credit, we have to give him that credit though. You can see some of those things being reversed. The Jammeh era, not the laws per se, because the laws are still in the books, right? But I still feel like there's it's more democratic today than it was 10 years ago. And I think many Gambians would agree to that. Moving forward, like I mentioned, what we need is people who are willing to offer us ideas that make sense and a very receptive audience. I don't think the Gambian audience is attuned to the answering people who answer those questions, because they're so cut out, they're so removed from it, because they're thinking about the next meal. The focus is not on democracy. If you give Gambians the option to live under a monarchy like they have in Saudi Arabia, for better housing, better meal, they will take that. That's just fact. Like, that's not even up for debate, right? Because again, democracy is great. In a way, it answers the political question. It doesn't answer the poverty. It doesn't answer the economic tumult we're in. It really doesn't. It does not even offer that. Democracy was never meant for that, right? It was never meant for that. Democracy is just basically the tyranny of the majority. It's a political system that answers some questions, but it really does not answer the economic problems. And the Gambian problem now, I would say our problems are more economic. Our economic problems outweigh our political problems. But the political problem is not divorced from the economic problem, because the ones leading the political fight really are totally divorced from the economics. Many of them cannot give you answers to how they can actually fix our economic issues. So until and unless we have people who are willing to offer this, and then we have a receptive audience, we're going to be basically going in this circle where basically our entire economy is going to be reliant on remittances and basically handouts from other, because Gambia, the economy is not producing enough jobs to keep up with population growth, right? Gambia, I mean, honestly, we're overpopulated. I don't think people even realize that, right? Gambia is, like, at independence, the population was, 300,000. When I was born in 1985, the Gambian population was, 700,000. We're 2.4 million now. 2.4 million. That's insane. And many of those people who were born during that period, between 1990 today, we've actually failed that entire generation because we really haven't even given them the skills. We haven't produced the environment where we can entice those people to stay in the country, right? Everybody want to leave the country. If anybody has an opportunity to leave, they would leave. Because again, there's nothing in the country to keep people there. So these are some of the problems. The answers, though, are, again, there's no silver bullet to our problem, because this is an issue of the state, right? The state has to answer some of these questions. What are the projections? What is the state doing? We look at crime, for example. My question to people is, Gambia is actually probably one of the most peaceful countries in the world, because the level of poverty in the country and the rate of crime, I mean, it doesn't even make sense. Gambians should be literally going at this rate, burglarizing every house, killing each other at the level of poverty we're at. But we're not seeing that. But at some point, it's going to get bad, because right now we're all whining, oh yeah, there's a burglary here, burglary there. My question is, do we believe that our society produces criminals for the sake of it? Or is it because many people don't have an outlet? Many of our young people don't have an outlet. They have actually no access to any kind of capital. There is no upward mobility for anyone. Until and unless we start answering these questions, no amount of prison, no amount of criminal justice, whatever, is gonna fix this. Is gonna fix our problems. Crime is gonna be on the ascendancy. More people are gonna find ways to leave the country. And until and unless we answer those questions, we tackle them in a serious way, we're gonna be in this circle for a long time. And perhaps, whenever the Senegalese leave, we're looking at probably basically the collapse of a government. And Barrow knows that. He's not stupid. He knows exactly why he wouldn't let the Senegalese out, because the moment we do that, we're basically going to face a really huge issue in that country.
And that is 60 years on after independence. Gambia cannot still provide security for its government and its citizens. Unfortunately, we will take a quick break, and then we'll play an insert of an interview when Sir Dawda granted an interview to a British journalist 9 years after independence in 1975. We'll take a listen to that excerpt.
And welcome. You may, ladies and gentlemen. And welcome. You may, ladies and gentlemen, ask any questions.
Can you tell us what subjects you had in mind for your discussions with the British government, particularly tonight?
Senator Ghani is here to introduce the president to you for the conference.
I hope you don't mind me.
Some African countries have recently criticized Arab oil producers for failing to respond to their African allies' need in times of oil crises. What is the Gambia's attitude to the Arab producers?
Well, we are very cautious about this criticism because, after all, the Arab oil-producing countries are developing countries possessing a natural resource which is a wasting resource, and I have no mind, they're justified in I have no doubt that they're justified in feeling that in the past they've not been getting the right price for this resource, for the oil. And of course they have also assisted the African cause by imposing embargoes on South Africa, Rhodesia, and the other racist regimes in Africa. And of course they are setting up this fund through the medium of the OAU and the Arab League to assist African members of the OAU who have been hit by the oil crisis.
The Gambia is one of Africa's smallest nations. Given that and the fact that it's almost totally surrounded by Senegal, how do you see the Gambia's political future? Will it retain its national identity?
Yeah, well, the Gambia has now been independent for 10 years, well, for 9 years. We will celebrate our 10th anniversary of independence in February 1975. We have not made a bad job of things, and there is no reason why we should not continue as an entity. Historically, we have been an entity for centuries. There is no reason why we should not continue as a separate, independent entity. But of course, in these days of regional groupings, we are very interested in what happens in our.
Suleiman, you had Jaura speaking there, coming to your questions about still 60 years on, still Senegalese are in the country. You hear Jaura said, we are going to maintain our national identity and culture 10 years after gaining independence, because the question was like, because Gambia and Senegal seems to have a lot of influence on Gambia since independence. What's your view on Jaura's statement, I say 50 years ago?
Yeah, that was a political answer, but in a practical way, Jawara was more serious at some point about the integration of the two economies. He realized that, right? Look at Gambia. Gambia is more like the Vatican or Lesotho or Liechtenstein. It's an enclave, it's an appendage of another country, right? We're literally inside Senegal. For me, there is no reason whatsoever. There's no reason why we should not have an economic integration with Senegal, because we literally depend on Senegal for everything, right? The politics is more complicated because we're literally different politically, very different politically. And I think that's one of the reasons, well, not one of the reasons why the Confederation failed, because that's Abdou Diouf's stuff. That's a whole different conversation. But I think we'll be better off having a more integrated economic system with Senegal, because look at it. I mean, I don't know whether tariffs or whatever. Getting anything into Senegal is a freaking nightmare. It's just a nightmare. I was in Gambia driving from Banjul to Dakar. You're stopped at every stop, like almost 9 stops between Karang and Dakar. They're going through every single stuff you got. And they're asking you, like, even the new piece that I was taking to Dakar, they were asking me where I was going to sell that. What benefit is there for Gambia today? Because right now we're at the mercy of Senegal. And for me personally, I think the arrangement we had before 82 is the arrangement we need to go back to when it comes to the security. There is no reason why we should still maintain that army, because they're just going to coup. Literally, that's what's going to happen. We need to be more realistic. Not all countries are designed the same way. Not all countries are equal. We are not a sovereign country, and we will never be a sovereign country because of our geography. We will benefit if we can have an integration, full integration of our two economies. We will benefit from that, but also from the security point. There is no reason why the Gambia should maintain this army that's literally just a sitting duck waiting to just, engage in coups. We will benefit if we can have the military and also the economic integration of the two countries. I think we'll be better off for that. The politics is a different thing. I don't think it's like that ship has sailed at this point. And I know there are some people making that argument now that, yeah, we need to go back to the Confederation and find ways to integrate the two political systems. They're not the same. Senegal is just way ahead of the Gambia. We're just far behind. And because of colonialism, we have actually created culturally, there are some differences too between Gambians and Senegalese, right? And that all in the last 60 years, that has really changed. Pre-independence might be different. Today, the normal Gambian is very different from the normal Senegalese, and that is factual in the way we behave, the way we consume and approach politics and all those things. So for me, Jawara's answer there was interesting, right? Because this was a guy who literally became president probably 3 years before that, right? Because he was prime minister before up until the republicanism, that's when he became president. So basically what you see there is somebody basically saying, yeah, we have to maintain our own sovereignty and whatnot. But Gambia is not Senegal. Gambia is not Nigeria. It's not Mali. It's not even Guinea-Bissau. Gambia is an enclave. It's an appendage. It's inside. It's a region within another country, right? So how do you best situate that? How do you actually leverage your size to benefit the people, rather than making arguments that we should be fully sovereign, which we will never be. Economically, we're not sovereign, right? We literally import everything that gets into the country. If Senegal closes the border, we're going to be at their mercy forever. So this is our reality. We need to understand our limitations, right? countries like Lesotho, they understand their limitations.
Absolutely.
Botswana,
Suleiman,
we need to understand that.
almost at the we yeah, thank you very much. We are almost at the tail end of the conversation, but we still have at least 30 minutes. Might be our other guest, Hasum Sise, the director of National, is trying to connect, and also the Jobate. But before that, I will go to Fatou Jan Sangor. Fatou, you live in Senegal. You work and live in Senegal for many years. You speak fluent French. You speak English. As the colonial will call the system of assimilation. You are assimilated into the Senegalese system. Give us your view about Senegambia relationship, looking at Gambia at 60. Do you think both nations can go without each other? And if we can't, what can we do to better our relationship, considering respect for self-sovereignty and self-rule?
Yeah, I think Saul nailed it really well. And I think sometimes we need to be passionate and leave our passion and emotion and be very practical. Yeah, he mentioned something. We are an enclave. Some call us an accident of history. So the geography, the history, looking at even the families, I think we are better off looking at things that could really be used to leverage in our region. Obviously, the big brother issue is always, when I looked at even in Europe, between some of the countries, between France, Belgium, or the smaller countries like Luxembourg. I used to work there in Luxembourg, and I think people are very practical. There was a time until in the around 2000s that Luxembourg didn't have a university, its proper university. They speak the language of the 3 countries that are surrounding them, and they make sure that they design their country. They design everything to meet the needs of their communities. Because you have a Germanophone community, you have a Francophone community, and then you have, the other bit, which is, the Luxembourg. And what they did is they managed to ensure that, from Belgium, Luxembourg itself, Germany, and France, they leverage on all those countries. And Luxembourg is one of the richest countries in Europe, even though it's very tiny, but they managed to understand what, is good for them, where they can add value in this whole region, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and then started to work with the different other countries. So I believe we had the chance. It was not the Gambia's fault only, I believe. The Confederation collapsed. I don't think big studies have been, conducted really to assess why, because there are a lot of sensitivity between Senegal and Gambia. And people generally prefer not to talk and go into some of these difficult issues unless we talk about those difficult issues. I think we will not be able to go. And I believe Gambia has a lot to gain because, as we say, we are importing everything, and most of the things are coming through Senegal. In terms of resources, now you've seen, now they are building, different ports in the regions, making almost ours kind of redundant, the sub-regional trade. When you look at how to call it, education-wise, they integrated English long ago, and most of them, especially in business, in the technology industry, even in government, they're kind of bilingual, and that gives them some edge. So for us, I think we are still in this very difficult situation, frustrated by maybe what happened during the Confederation or before, and sometimes the frustration we see traveling to Senegal. But I, as a person who lived in Senegal I may also make a disclaimer, I'm a Senegambian, but, I don't feel like, we should not be emotional about this. We need just to be practical, realistic, and know what we want and go get it. And this relationship is very critical. And I always say that Senegal is the most important partner in terms of diplomacy, in terms of business, in terms of security. And one thing that we need to be realistic about, Saul mentioned it, Senegal will never, never allow Gambia to be used as destabilizing his country. So our security will be continually to be tied to Senegalese security. Now, what are we going to do to ensure that we have leverage, we have the right men and women in uniform, and also we reduce the size and get, few people who are competent, who can be like interfacing with the Senegalese security, and we have like integrated security for certain for the purpose of these two countries. We cannot be in isolation. We cannot afford it, because you cannot be in somebody and think that you can jump, dance, whatever you do, and then say nobody should have a say about. Unfortunately, we are, or fortunately, depending on how we see it, we are in Senegalese belly. So we can't be in that position and think that we can jump or kick here and there. And so for me, that's the analogy I use. When Jammeh was on, I said, you know what, it's difficult for these two countries to cooperate. You have a democracy and a dictatorship, and you have the dictatorship in the belly, so they will control. They cannot interfere directly, but they make sure also they monitor. And I think that's legitimate. That's what the big powers are
but
doing.
Remember this. Let me
finish this one. Let me finish this one.
Separate independent countries, Fatu. Go ahead.
Yes, no, we are separate. Well, I'm telling that let's look at geopolitics. If you look at geopolitics today, any countries around the world, your source of energy, let's say just take a source of energy only, which is, strategic in your development, in your security. Those countries that are a source of your energy, your certain things, you make sure that, you have a say in certain things. Look at the Gulf states vis-a-vis of America. Of course, it's mutual benefit because they also want the protection of America, but America will never leave them on their own, because their survival strategically depends on that part of the region. Is philosophically, you may say, is historical. There are so many other variables that are playing, but the most important one is economic. So I think, and for us, so Senegal is economic, is geography, but don't forget something that is very important, is also the population, the composition of our population. You see? When you have your people in other countries and they are integrated for generations, you have a say. You want to have a say. Now, the way they do it is very subtle, is kind of disengaged on the surface, but I think they set up mechanism to make sure that they have an eye on our backyard. Now, what do we do as a small country also to get more from this relationship? And I believe if Gambia and Senegal cannot integrate economically and security-wise, it will be very difficult even for the rest of the region to integrate, because we have so much in common. We have we have, the families are integrated in some way. Sometimes, we deny certain things. How many people you see on a daily basis going to funeral in Senegal and vice versa? Because a cousin passed, something happened there, ziyaras are there, church issues. So there are so many things that are, that bring us together, that binds us together, that, we cannot deal with the issue with emotions. So for me, I think we need to put cards on the table, look at the interests of each, and see how we can move. And I think we have an interest to move fast and move strategically and make sure that our interests are taken into account in these agreements. There are so many agreements between Senegal and the Gambia that many people don't even know. You see, during the impasse, there were so many countries who were really kind of very nervous about ECOWAS intervention. And personally, I've done international law. I've done some of these things on Gambia-Senegal relation. But there were so many treaties that I discovered in 2016, in that December. And I was saying, wow, all these treaties between the two countries on everything you can imagine. So these are the things also that our researchers, our people should be, and why we have signed those ones. And throughout the years, from Jawara's time, before independence, there was some kind of negotiation. From Jawara's time, During Yagames, even no matter how difficult the relation, there were a lot of agreements, and during the President Barrow. So I believe that we've done those things for a purpose. We've done those things also. Both countries know what they were doing. Now the citizens not, on the same wavelength. I believe that we need to enlighten the citizenry, but importantly, we need to bring also the right people in some of these positions so that when they negotiate, also they negotiate well. For me, in treaties, rule, like trade agreements, all those issues are to be negotiated well. And it's not because we are small that we should not be negotiating. Sometimes I believe that there are things that we need to renegotiate with Senegal, but we have to get the right people for that so that we can renegotiate and see the changing landscape in our country. But security is something that we need really to be realistic about. Do we need a big army in the Gambia? Do we need certain things? Can we redeploy for economic purposes? Can we reduce the public service?
We still have the Senegalese army in the Gambia.
Let's say we have the ECOWAS intervention units. Let's put it that way. But who is funding that, and why is it? Have we done really proper research? And Saul mentioned something. Are we safe without ECOWAS? Have we done a proper analysis? Gambians want the economic to leave. Research have shown it. The last mentioned that Gambians are not at ease. But the problem that I have with all these is that have we done proper research? Are we bringing the policies, to the citizenry so that they understand what the stakes are? Are we really doing the proper reforms so that our security can do the job? And also, do we need big security? Why also are we too edgy with Senegal? Can we have better relationship that is based on trust and social contract that will be beneficial to the two population? For me, I think that's where we should put our all these countries you've seen in the north. They have gone through these things. They fought wars. But when they realize that they are interconnected, they are interlinked population-wise, they are intermarried, and the economies are so linked, what they do, they sat and agreed on so many things. And we are doing that, but it's only at level of governments. But we're not doing it at level of people, and we need to do that. One example that I want to give, whoever learn about the European Union, how it develop and form, of course, you have leaders who will take the initiative, but they bring along their people. And people were so fed up with the wars in Europe, and they were intermarried though, but they were fighting. So, they brought their researchers, their thinkers, and you know what they said at some stage, for people to adhere, for all these things not to happen again, it's not only politics. All this politics you can do. When people are fed up, they will go back to war. When people are not happy, they will criticize. They don't want to be united. But one thing you should do, unite the hearts and unite the economies. And you see what they did? Whoever is in Europe now, the Erasmus and the ancestors of the Erasmus, what they started to do these university programs, school programs, and they started to intermarry more than before. They used to marry at very strategic levels, like the kings and the family. But now they started to take it to lower levels. They unite the hearts. The bloods are so mixed. Today, all this talk that you hear, England, UK, and the rest of the Europe, why is it so difficult? The divorce will be so difficult. They are so interlinked. You go to Germany and France, they are tension, but they will never divorce because they united their hearts after the Second War. They united so much their economy, and they agreed that they will be in tandem. No matter what, they will face the rest of the world together. And I said, if Senegal and Gambia, and maybe to some extent Guinea-Bissau, cannot work together to be that face for the rest of the region, I give up my case on the regional integration. We will never integrate. And in as much as our political leaders are problematic, I think we, the citizens, also sometimes are very problematic. We are very nationalistic, and we all want to remain in our small corners, but we call for Pan-Africanism. And you go around Africa, we are all into our small corners, but we want to fight the rest of the world. We cannot do that. So for me, my argument and my plea is that we need to be ready for the prime time. If we want to be treated equally, treated fairly, get the right people for this negotiation, and prepare ourselves and leave the emotions on the side, and we will move forward, review some of the things that we need to review in terms of security, in terms of trade, but also put in our mind that Senegal is not our enemy. Gambia is not enemy of Senegal. We are together in this if we want to save the region. If we are to save the region, and we are now lucky to have Gambia as a democracy, Senegal as a democracy, I think we can work together to be the model for the rest of the region.
That's a brilliant historical perspective right there from Fatou Jan Senghor. The takeaway is unite the hearts, for a better Senegambia. Gambia cannot go without Senegal, and Senegal cannot go. And the economists too. But always economists, Senegal is always assuming the big brother role, and Gambia feel belittled. Look at the fallout from the Senegambia Confederation. Otherwise today Gambia and Senegal would have been one big country. But as you said, we are intermarried. I think we have to take this discussion all the way down to family relations, because you have cousins here, brothers here, they are intermarried. I and you used to live in Senegal. So when they tell me Gambian, I was like, nope, I am a Senegambian. So because that's how we want to, be united through having compassion for each other. Many thanks, Fatou Jan Senghor. Our new guest is joining us live from Norway. That's Ndeye Jobate, a political activist who have been very instrumental in the fight against dictatorship in the Gambia. And many thanks for joining us. You are joining us late, but we deeply appreciate your time. I won't waste much time because we are almost at the final end of this brilliant independent special conversation right here on Alkamba Times. So tell us, Ndeye, how do you think the Gambian diaspora can contribute to Gambia's nation development, especially during this important independent milestone? Gambia at 60. It's a long journey full of challenges, prospects, and opportunities. Many thanks once again for joining us. And also, Hasum Sise is right here, our big man from the Gambia, historian, is also joining us live from Banjul. Hasum, welcome. But first, I will talk to Ndeye, and then I will get back to you quickly, Mr. Hasum Sise. Many thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much, Teni, for inviting me. And I do apologize for coming late, but you know how it is with independence. You get invited. I'm just coming from another program that has to come
everywhere.
And then I just want to greet my sister, Fatou Jan, and then Dr. Suleiman. I haven't met him before, and I'm just going to say hello to him. And Mr. Hasum, that our paths cross, but we haven't really seen. And it's an honor to be on this platform. And Sani, before we even go to diaspora conversation, the diaspora contribution, I just want to do a little bit follow-up on what Fajan said about the heart and our relationship with Senegal. I think the biggest challenge we've seen during Jawara's time, we didn't have that problem that much, our relationship with Senegal. They have been so cordial, and we've been really managed. We managed to be together, work together, but from Jammeh, we started seeing that relationship forwarding, because it's the way our leadership is selling this relationship. However much people will want to be together, because I don't think there is many Gambians these days who don't have a relationship or relative in Senegal. But then it's the way they sell it. They sell Gambia as an underdog to Senegal. And that caused a lot of question, that caused a lot of frustration, that caused a lot of anger from the Gambian people. Not that they don't like Senegal, but Gambians also, even though we are small, even though we are not that rich, we don't want to be seen to be underdogs. I think this is where the challenge comes. If our leaders are selling this properly as brotherhood and sisterhood, as people who are equal, as people who are just nations that have relationship and related, that I think it wouldn't be, because Jawara sell it very well to the Gambian people, and Gambian people bought it. So from Jammeh to Barrow, we are seeing this underdog. We are seeing Gambia to be seen as almost a province to Senegal. So Gambians are reacting to that. That is where the problem is. Now, going into the diaspora, unfortunately, those of us in the diaspora, there's a lot we can contribute, and statistics have shown it. We've seen how much we contribute to our GDP, but yet still we don't even have the right to vote. Yet still we don't even have the right, almost like we don't have the right to even comment on issues of national interest, because you hear people saying that we are sitting in our comfort zone and trying to run things in the Gambia. And we are also seeing a new development that is also from Jammeh, the anti-diaspora, now to Barrow, the anti-diaspora syndrome that is coming back also to haunt us and turn us again, diaspora versus the state. That's what these are the development we're saying, which is so unfortunate, because one thing both Jammeh and Barrow never understood is that those of us sitting in the diaspora, we love the Gambia as much as they love the Gambia. We are affected by the situation in Gambia as much as they are affected by the situation in Gambia. And this is where our passion, this is where our stake comes in. So diaspora, even when Barrow took over, diaspora has contributed so much in terms of businesses, bringing businesses, building even construction works, and then helping the families. You see on social media, every time there is something about fundraising to help somebody, to cure somebody, and you see how much the diaspora rally around. These are not citizens who hate their people. These are not citizens who want to cause problem for the Gambia, because they step up to help in not just their families, but outside of that. We've seen the statistics being break down into hospital, what goes into the sector, what we bring in, what goes into the hospital sector, what goes into construction. In fact, we've seen this year's statistic that even consumption, we contribute more than the government. So there's a huge potential that is to be really tapped on. But the government is now going back to the Jammeh modus, where they see the diaspora as the enemy, not as a partner in development. What they want the diaspora to do is to send their monies, build things in the Gambia, and keep their mouth shut. That's what they expect, and that cannot happen. So this is my take on that, Seni, because we have done a lot. I myself sitting here in Norway, when this government changed, we took investors to Gambia, flow them out from Norway down to the Gambia. We brought different companies. Last year, June, or 2 years ago, June, we signed a contract, make sure the Minister of Fisheries sign a contract between the Minister of Fisheries in the Gambia to make sure that, because Norway has been so much involved in the fisheries department, even fisheries, the companies and all these things, we made sure they sign those contracts. But even when you sign those things, nothing happens. It's just stay there, because obviously, is it the diaspora involved? Because we go running around from office to office in this country in Norway, using our leverage with the government of Norway, using our leverage with the companies in Norway to be able to bring what is there. But everything gets stuck. Everything gets stuck. So this is where the challenge is. I think we need a fresh thinking. We need to look at the government. Where we should start is to see the diaspora as a partner, and then accept that the diaspora cannot be silenced in the event, cannot be silenced in the face of corruption, cannot be silenced in the face of bad governance, cannot be silenced in the face of political corruption, cannot be silenced in the face of poverty poverty that has been created by the state. The diaspora cannot be silenced in that. Thank you.
Absolutely, the diaspora cannot and will not be silenced on this situation, because the diaspora play a crucial role in our socio-economic advances. Many thanks, Ndai, for that brilliant conversation. Okay, I'm going straight to our special guest, the historian, the man who is the encyclopedia of Gambian history, a man who knows a lot about the pre and post-independent colonization period, Mr. Hassum Cissé. Hassum, thank you for joining us from Banjul. I know you are busy, man. I call you the most sought-after historian in the country. The media is running all the way trying to get Hassum because he's the encyclopedia of our history. Hassum,
thank you very much.
The memory lane, 60 years on. Yeah, 60 years on, where are we and where are we heading to? Mr. Cissé, are you there?
So all of you, I say good evening, and of course to the to the big man himself, Mr. Seni MK Mari.
Mr. Hasumi, since we are getting some noise from your area, it looks that Mr. Hasum is having some challenges, but I will unmute him right now. If the noise settles, then we can move, or else I will go to Professor Sol. It seems he has a lot to say, you know, because we have a new guest. So, Mr. Hasum, can you hear me?
I think Mr. Hasum might be.
Can you hear me, Mr.?
Maybe he has
yes,
logged
he's on two. Let me.
One has to be muted.
Yeah, let me get out here. Okay, let me get that out for him, because it seems that Hasum is logged in on two devices. I will remove this one and then we'll get to him back. Okay, on that, Suleiman, you had and they talk about, you know, the role of diaspora, but they are frustrated because the government think that they can do this job alone without the involvement of the diaspora, despite the diaspora contribution very visible. Just recently at the 8th State of Nation, you know, event in Banjul, we have had the governor of the central bank talking about, you know, the huge remittances that the diaspora is contributing. Can we go without the diaspora involvement in the governance and democratization process in the country?
No, absolutely not. That's not even realistic. I mean, I think a few years ago, remittances accounted for 22% of our GDP. That's like insane numbers, right? Like they said, whenever there is something, we expect the diaspora to step in, right? That's the diaspora who has to do X, Y, and Z. And we really don't even have a serious economy without the diaspora, right? So remittances basically run that economy. So Gambia is a remittance, it's a handout economy. Its remittance is an 8 for the most part, because the tax base is not big enough. It's just not. So I think
the country is a tax-based economy, Suleiman.
Sure, but there's like what, 2 businesses they're taxing. I mean, I'm just being sarcastic here, but we don't have a lot of businesses to tax. But yeah, it's a tax-heavy. They tax a lot. Like it's not a very liberal economic system, right? But we don't have big enough enterprises and industries to tax to fix our problems, right? So we rely a lot on remittances, right? What we are taxing is not that far off from what the amount of remittances that are coming in. And we have to be very careful about those numbers from Bua Sedi and them, right? These are people they're capturing. They're capturing the formal part of it, right? The official numbers. We're not talking about the informal. And I don't even know any Gambian who goes through those formal channels anymore. You know, the Western Unions and them, right? So these are just the numbers they're capturing, right? So if that's very conservative estimate. So right now, one could argue that actually we have more remittances coming in than the taxes we're getting in that country. I think somebody can boldly make that assertion, right? Yeah. So yeah, I don't think we cannot divorce the two, right? The Gambian diaspora is well integrated in the Gambian system, right? All the homes that are being built are built by Gambians. All the kids that are going to school, those school fees come from the diaspora. The household, the dependents, all that stuff comes from the diaspora, right? The question now is, how can we leverage the diaspora? So Bua Sedi was here in the States. I think you probably met him from the central bank. And they had this scheme that they are kind of
National Development Initiative here.
Yeah, the initiative. But I think they can go beyond that, right? I think they can have something like a remittance bond or something like that, right? Why? Because most of the money coming in is for consumption, right? Literally, that's what it is for, right? So how can the government leverage that? Like, how can they use that money to find a way to make it into something more tangible? Because you and I are going to send money. Our kids are not. They're not. So this is not something that's going to be like here forever. So we got to use this opportunity that we have today. And at some point, we need to get the diaspora a vote. They have to vote because, you know, we're not part of the franchise, right? We're basically excluded, even though legally we are, right? But we are not in practice. And I think the government should find a way to bring the diasporas, you know, the voices to the fore. And you realize, you understand what happened in 2016. The diaspora was heavily involved in that, right? But sometimes too, I think the diaspora can, we tend to overestimate too how important we are sometimes. And I think we need to understand that too, right? Because some of the people on the ground, you know, the dynamics are different because we have power. That's the reality of it. Just look at anybody who left Gambia 6 months ago. The moment they come back, they're like some kind of a demigod in that country, right? Because you hold a lot of power. But there's also a lot of insecurity, right? For the people who are on the ground, like they look at you in a different way. And, you know, you cannot blame them for that. And I think some of us in the diaspora are also totally kind of divorced from what is going on because money alone is not what connects you to the place. It's much more than that. Okay. And I think these are conversations that need to be had.
Absolutely. Many thanks, Suleiman. Before I lose this guy, because I definitely... Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hassoum, because we cannot afford to lose you again. Go ahead.
I wanted to contribute to this to diaspora discussion. I mean, really, I think, you know, the diaspora has had a very, very important part to play in the evolution of this country, even in the nationalist struggle. That we have to, you know, maybe we should start the story from there. I mean, not just to see them as people who send money, you know, but even in the struggle for independence. You know, remember the Gambia diaspora. I mean, dates to the 1860s. You know, I mean, you had the stowaways, those who used to hide in the ships, you know, in Kuntaur or in Georgetown, you know, or in battles, you know, and then they hide, you know, and end up, you know, in a port, you know, in Norway or in Sweden, you know, or in Liverpool or in Bordeaux, you know, in France. You see, so this was the first, type of Gambian diaspora. And of course, if we exclude the slaves, okay, you see, and you know, these people, you know, I just don't expect on that. Were eager and willing to support the very, very early political parties in this country. They supported the newspapers, you know, the nationalist newspapers, by being subscribers. I mean, these editors in the 40s and 50s will, send newspapers, you know, up to Norway. Okay, to the Gambian diaspora. You know, of course, to do, you know, to Nigeria. Then you have people like Alaji Sankumbayo, you know, among the first financiers of the People's Progressive Party. You know, Solo Dabo, you know, the diamond magnate, you know, who was in the DRC, you know, very close to Mobutu, you know, who also was a very, very, you know, strong, you know, financier of the PPP in its early days in the struggle for independence. And now in the 70s, you know, the diaspora in Scandinavia, in Sweden, you know, Norway, you know, and you know, where very, very, you know, where the people insisting on human rights. Okay, all the pressure, okay, on the Jawara administration, you know, particularly after the banning of Moja in 1980, you know, on human rights, you know, the rights of prisoners, torture was led by the Gambian diaspora, you know, particularly in Scandinavia. You see, you know, of course, the rest, you know, is still current affairs. I don't want to talk about even the Jame era. You know, how the diaspora, you know, played a very, very significant role in the struggle against, you know, the dictatorship. So really, I want to see the diaspora as part and parcel of the Gambian story, of the struggle for independence, of the consolidation of the rule of law, you know, human rights and democracy, and not just to see them as people who send us money and we spend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hasum, for that explanation. This is why it's important to know history, because without knowing history, you don't even know where you are heading to. Hasum, 60 years on today, where are we and where are we heading to?
I will thank you very much. I say, you read my piece. And the glass is half full. Yes, that's how I see. The glass is half full. Me, I believe it could have been worse than this. Yeah, our situation could have been worse than this. Yeah. So really, I will say thank God that we are, where we are today, because all the indices were, negative. Okay, all the indices were negative. For example, in 1933, the British enacted the criminal codes that we are still suffering from. This vindictive, very, very, strict, system of justice, where all what they think of is to jail, and to jail. That was done over 100 years ago. The criminal codes, the prison system that we had, that we now have, came out of that. Very, very, very vindictive, criminal code. Okay, and now after independence, you realize that thanks to the ethos of Sadauda, and this, for human dignity, we were able to, sort of, sail through, these, very, very, vindictive, laws, bad laws, I will call them, and a very, very, stifling prison system. Now, unfortunately, when Yajame came to power, he just, he did not do much, to alleviate, okay, the pressure that these criminal codes that were inherited from the colonial authorities. So he used it, so cruelly that, what happened, happened, you see. So really, the colonial legacy is what we should all be thinking about. We inherited a lot of bad things. I'm starting with the criminal codes, just to tell you, how the issue of rights, human dignity, human rights, had a very, very, slow start, because of the colonial legacy. Women's rights, you see. Yeah. We are doing work on the sexual exploitation of women by colonial officials. So far, we have, I have unearthed, several stories, dating to 1912, wow, when British colonial officials, sexually exploited, women in the protectorate, in the area where I come from, in the Njau area, in Banjul here, even a colonial governor, who raped a young, Banjul girl, and there was a child, out of it. Wow. You see, like a former police commissioner, a head of the police in 1943, who had a similar, story. So you can see that, the colonial legacy, is rampant, with violations. So that some of the things that we lived through under the Jammeh era, the rights violations, the anti-press laws dates, to 1946, called the Press Ordinance. Okay, that Governor Sir backward right was angry with the with the independent press, like the Gambia Outlook, the Weekly News, and he said, they are going to, he was going to register all the newspapers, and they have to apply for fresh registration with a bond, that's BOND. Something that Yajame also copied, in 1995. I think you can remember that, however young you are. For a week, yeah. No newspapers are created in this country, because Jame insisted that all the editors must go and file in a bond before their newspapers are registered. You know, so the colonial legacy has to be understood for us to really appreciate. Some of the problems we are facing and how far we have gone as a country. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Auntie Fatu. I will ask you because hearing from Mr. Hassoum about the colonial legacy on women's rights, I never knew that the British were this brutal to an extent that they were raping our women. Looking at those laws, before and now, where do you envisage a country where respect for women's rights will be at the center stage? You are on mute. It looked like okay, go ahead.
No, I say that it's good to hear the historical perspective on some of these issues. One thing maybe that we need to underscore is that we want also government and leaders who will change things. If you believe that something is wrong and you say, okay, I'll be lenient, we will not implement some such laws, but I'll leave them in the books. For me, I think that's one of the major problem that we have. And we are seeing that happening today. When we have the change, everybody was very enthusiastic. We all work together really to identify the key areas of reform, the ones that could have been changed quickly, and the amendment made by Jammeh, especially during his tenure, to ensure that he stifled freedom and reduce the space. And when the change happened, those laws were there, identified already, analyzed. And what we are seeing today is like a kind of the practice is very advanced, I would say, in terms of press freedom. People are expressing their views. Today we are here talking about assessing the situation, talking about things. So the line from Banjul to the diaspora is open. We are all talking irrespective of the challenges. But the problem we are having is that we are progressing. We have a voice. We are speaking out, and the government seems to be also in line with that. They have made commitments. They have produced all their reports to treaty bodies. They made commitments. But what is stopping us from in the books? You see, this is the problem. And once you discuss, people scared. Or if you change it, it might open the floodgates for more defamation, for certain things to happen. I just don't believe in that. If we believe that we are in a democracy and we believe that those laws were bad, they were oppressing the people, and we have the mandate of the people for a space that is free and open, we should just go ahead and change all those laws. So I don't believe in the situation, oh, let's leave it. You may need it one day. You may not use it yourself. Today, we've seen that they may not use it one day, but somebody can use it, and you never know. Look at what happened in Tunisia. We worked so hard, all of the activists, and they've changed everything, most of the laws, and one day, a professor of law who from Norway, became the president, and they're reversing all the gains made 10 years ago. So that's why it's important to change the framework so that even when you have a difficult situation, it could be a battle, it could take time for things to happen. But if you leave them in the laws, whoever comes tomorrow can just start using it. Look at what is happening in the US. Courts are fighting back. Donald Trump, imagine if they had bad laws, if they didn't have strong courts. All these decisions will just be implemented automatically. Some of them might be implemented later, but as we speak, they are reversing some of his decisions. So that's why I believe, Mr. Cisse, you rightly pointed that our governments were very lenient, they were very kind. But I think in terms of our assessment, also, yes, I think they were maybe their heart was at the right place, but I think they needed also to do more, and I believe we've seen that in many African countries. When I work in many countries, people, when they are in the opposition, they fight. Let me give you one example: public service. They fight to say, no, we don't have access to the national television. We don't have access to this. the day they arrive in power, they won't change the laws because it's convenient. And sometimes we just leave it in case we may need it. And that in case we may need it, that's not consolidating democracy. So I think together, we may also need to do some assessment to say, yeah, these are the gaps. Yeah, people might be good at this level. People might be really pro-democratic, but they're not going the extra mile to overhaul the whole system. And until we overhaul, it will be very difficult for citizens to have a voice, because you still have this hanging on the head of people to say, oh, you know, they might use it one day against me. I don't know when they're going to use it. So it becomes like a self-censor measure at the end of the day. But I just wanted to underscore that. Yeah, but we all know what colonial legacy has been across Africa. We've seen it in all over the countries. What happened, the exploitation. I think colonialism has been based on exploiting, the weakest and taking the resources. So I think now we are moving 60 years down the line. We took stock. We know what happened. History has been there. Some are documented, some are not. But I think we also need to take our own responsibilities and move on. But I do agree with Mr. Cisse. We also need to know what happened in the past, because if you don't know what happened in the past, you may also live in fallacy.
Hey, Sini, there are two things that Mr. Cisse touched on, and also Father, that I just want to touch on a little bit, right? So I think, Father, you mentioned something really profound and very interesting here, right? Because when the struggle was going on, people were going after Jammeh for violating human rights. He didn't want protests, right? People who supported Sandeng and sent them money to protest, when they took over the government, were against protests. That was profound to me. That really hit me hard. That really changed my perspective on some people, right? Because these were they believed that people should protest against the state. All of a sudden, they had a problem with people going to Westfield to protest, to go to Backwater to protest. Because again, the goal of every state is to protect the state. We don't even have to be romantic about it. People in power will do whatever they have to do to protect their power, right? Going to the historical perspective here too, and I think, Sini, you said something about how the colonialists were brutal towards women and also how they were brutal towards Gambians. But let's not forget how brutal and just absolutely brutal the jihadists were on the Gambian people. The Gambian system, for the most part, the pre-colonial cultural leaders we had were destroyed by the jihadists for the most part, not the British or even the French in some cases. We have to be very mindful of that. We have to, and I think sometimes we forget that. The role people like Fode Kabar Dumia played in the destruction, in the absolute destruction, and people like Maba Jahu in that. No, this is fact. This is not even up for debate.
Yeah,
they destroyed.
I would reference this to him.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Those people. Yes, the British did a lot of. They destroyed a lot. But if you look at a place like even Fonyi, why did Fonyi even become part of the British? They literally begged the British to take over Fonyi so that the British will protect them against the Marabouts, the jihadists. The jihadists, they were brutal towards women, towards everybody in that country that wasn't a Muslim. They destroyed the whole system we had there. When people talk about Mama Tamba Jammeh, those were colonial chiefs. They were invented by the British because the system collapsed already. The Alkali system we have today is not any different. Those were all inventions. Because what happened was that the jihadists literally destroyed, they single-handedly destroyed a good chunk. I mean, look at Combo, for example. The jihadists were the ones who destroyed it. They destroyed the local system we had there. The British did not do that. So as we're reflecting, going back into history, understanding how we got here, it's even fascinating. People even talking about somebody like Fode Kabar or even Maba Jahu as some, in a good light, because these people were brutal. They were absolutely brutal towards the Gambian and the Senegal. It was a Senegambian going towards what is today Guinea-Bissau in some instances, but these were really brutal. Even if you look at the case like Guinea-Bissau, without somebody like Abdou Ndiaye, the mercenary, the Portuguese would have never taken control over Guinea-Bissau. He was the mercenary who went there from Senegal, literally destroyed many lives and livelihoods. So as we reflect on independence, and as we celebrate some of these people, like, let's not forget, sure, people like Fode Kabar provided some kind of resistance against British and French rule. That is true. But they also destroyed the traditional systems we had. So within the frame of this conversation, we can have those conversations both in tandem.
Absolutely. The jihadists also brutally destroyed the country, according to Dr. Suleiman Jai. This conversation is so interesting. I have been having these two, Fadjan Senghor and Suleiman, discussing for an hour, and we are almost to 2 hours. So we are left with only 10 minutes. But I want to make sure that I make best out of this 10 minutes from Day and Hasum. So Hasum, before coming to you, I will quickly jump on Day. She's a political activist who, has been working with other activists in bringing change to Gambia. So Sunday, tell me, what role do political activism and grassroots movement play in shaping the future of the Gambia post-independence going forward? How do you see political activism 60 years on today?
Yeah, I think, it's quite interesting Hasum's deliberation and, of course, what Fatu is talking about this willingness, because it looks like we are still in the same roller coaster that we have been, because these laws, as Hasum really saw, from the colonialists to now, is there. And Fatu put it really in a very good context. It's like, let's keep it, we might need it. We have to be safe. Let's keep this law. So if these rules are not changed, remember when we reflect a little bit back to this whole issue of the independence, when these people went to fight, they fight based on self-determination. They fight based on social justice. They fight based on good governance. They fight based on economic prosperity. But here we are stuck with these things. We're still struggling with these laws. To talk about that, the colonialists have left these laws and they are still here with us. That says a lot about our leadership. That says a lot about the people governing us. Now, coming 60 years, coming again, I think we are going to still continue with this fight. But I have hope in the Gambian people. I have hope in the Gambian people that they will stand up. They are not going to give up. One thing Yaya Jammeh taught us is that we have to fight for what we believe in. We have to fight to get our own independence. We have to fight to get justice. We have to fight to be able to even have economic prosperity, because these are the things Jammeh taught us in the struggle, in the fight for change, that nothing comes easy. Gambians used to be very scared of people killed politically, and we've seen it during Jammeh's time. So now people are like immune to that, and they believe that is the only way to go. We are in a phase, very difficult phase at this moment, because it's like a stolen victory. Our victory has been stolen from us. Now is another phase, 2.0, that we are going to fight again to be able to get that back, that victory, to take it back. It's like you fought, you are coming back to take it. So we are going to face that. And of course, the new generation, Gambians are more alert now, more aware now, know their rights. Of course, there is some fear now because, of course, people started, there is pockets of arrest, taking people to court. All this threat that is happening is sending people back. But at the same time, it's creating a lot of resistance, resilience, and determination for change. So as we move forward, we're heading more to that self-determination we are talking about, that our forefathers talked about. We are going to go there, and that will be the base and the springboard for us to get into good governance and social justice. So that is what I'm seeing. And we lay the foundation. I always said, when people say, let them talk, or are you not tired of talking? I say, we should talk. If I die today, I know there's somebody else who will pick from there. That person, if that person die, somebody will pick, just like our forefathers. Today, they are not here to listen to us. Today, they are not here to be with us. Today, they are not here to support us. But we are here as their grandsons and daughters who stood and defend what they talk about in 1965. Self-determination, economic prosperity, good governance, and social justice. And we'll continue the fight. That is how it's going to go.
We will continue the fight where our forefathers stay, and they job out many thanks. Hasum, the all is yours. My final question before I give all of you 1 minute to round this conversation, reflecting on the last 60 years, what lesson can we learn from our historical experiences as a nation, Hasum?
Well, thank you very much. I think the lesson of respect for human rights and dignity, is paramount. That's what Sadara fought for. And that is why even after the 1981 attempted coup by Kuko Samsanya, there was a lot of agitation for revenge, summary justice, executions, but none of those things happened. Okay, over 2,000 Gambians were arrested, but not a single detainee, disappeared. Everybody who was arrested have their names in the gazette. So today we historians have the name of the person, his address, where he was arrested and where he was detained at Mile 2, at Bakau School, at the depot in Birkama, So that is kind of human rights, that our founding fathers, fought for. There was no impunity. Every detainee in 81 faced justice. There was no impunity. You see. Now, another thing, and Dr. Jai mentioned this. Some systems we need to revisit them. Saying, this area council thing is, is colonial. It dates to about 1962, 63. I was saying, why can't Basse, have its own mayor? Basse, should be declared a city, with an elected mayor. Birkama, should be declared a city, with its own elected mayor. Sukuta, can have its own mayor. It's a city. And Bakau can be declared a city, with its own mayor. So that this archaic, he was talking about the alcaldes, but even the area councils, there is uneven development, because really the problems of Basse Town are different, from the problems of a village, far away from Basse. Maybe Basse is asking for feeder roads. Maybe that village is asking for water. You see? So I think this area council thing needs revisiting. Let us have this, big towns declared a city. It doesn't take anything but a regulation, declared, cities with their own mayors. Okay? And that will really, reject local government administration, bring, decentralization, closer, to the people, and there will be a healthy competition, among these, cities and their mayors. And that is something that I want to suggest, as the way forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hasum. So we are almost at the end. We just left with 4 minutes. So I will give a closing statement, 1 minute to each of the panelists. And I must thank you, for, bearing with me. It's been 2 hours. We've been sitting here discussing the way forward for Gambia at 60. And I'm very grateful for your presence. Then Suleiman, 1 minute, your final statement, Gambia at 60, the way forward.
Sure, it's still a work in progress. We have a lot of work to do. Generations of Gambians to come will one day ask us living, what have we done with our time? I wish and hope that we'll see that we've mastered our destiny and we have contributed to the Gambia ever true. That, in essence, I think, should be our summons to the Gambia ever true.
Are you there, Suleiman?
Yep. Did you hear me?
Okay. Yes, yeah. I do. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Fatou Jan Sangor, an international lawyer who is Senegalese Gambian, I will call you, but you prefer to be called Senegambian, So your final take, Gambia at 50, way forward.
Yeah, I think we need to be deliberate in the way we deliver justice, especially for certain group of people, notably those who are more vulnerable, the women. But I think also we need to revisit our position in the world stage, given that, we've been very, very dependent on some of these donors. The world has been changing, and we really need to be sufficient self-reliance. That's the theme of this year. So I think we need to match our words with action and really tap on our human resources and see how we can make sure that, we leverage on the quality of human resources we have and make sure that we invest in youth and employment.
Match our words with action. Brilliant. That's a powerful catchword. And Jabate, many thanks for joining us. Final word, way forward, Gambia at 60.
Yes, I think the way forward in the next 60 years, we have to really take it with boldness and urgency and a clear vision. Because what we are seeing now, we're seeing a new form of insurgency. When I say insurgency, people tell me that when there are no guns and all that, I say, but the state insurgency, where you have a death sentence through the health system, a state death sentence where when a government cannot provide basic health care to its citizens, that means it's a state-sanctioned death. Then also we are facing a situation whereby you have state-sanctioned poverty. When a state is saying that you have to be part of us for you to be successful, for you to even get a basic job, that is state-sanctioned poverty. That's the new insurgency we are seeing in the Gambia. We're seeing political corruption, where you have to be part of the political team to be able to even exercise your basic rights. That is political corruption. That's the new insurgency we are seeing. We are seeing state tribalism, where state is using tribe against other tribe to sustain its power. And that is also another insurgency we are coming. So for us to, in the next 60 years to come, in the next 60 years, we have to be bold enough. It should be tackled with boldness, urgency, and clear vision, because we are sinking as a nation. And that is very clear. So I'm just urging everybody that we should really look at this Gambia and have it in our heart. You have to have Gambia in the heart, and we have to be able to talk to each other, unite, and be ready to take this boldness and the road forward. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Hassum. It's always good to read your write-ups and your historical analysis you're doing. Is really something very relevant. And my sister Fatu, is always great and an honor to be with you on a panel, and your great service to the nation, as well as Dr. Suleiman. It's nice to meet you for the first time and great to listen to. Thank you so much, Seni, for inviting me to join. It's really great. And yeah, that is the Kudang genes as well. Thank you so much.
Dismantle the state insurgency. I love that term, Ndejawate, many thanks. Finally, our special guest, Hassum Sise. The way forward, Gambia at 50, Gambia at 60. What is at stake? Your final message to Gambians celebrating and looking ahead? It seems Hassum is gone because of connection issues, but here we are. This brings us to the end of this special conversation with my special guest, Suleiman. Dr. Suleiman joining us live from US, they live from Norway, and prominent women rights activist Fatou Jagne Senghor live from Banjul. Banjul or Dakar? Because you have two. Gambia, okay, live from Banjul. So many thanks, everyone. So we'll draw the curtains here. Happy Independent celebration to Gambians wherever you are celebrating this important day. Bye-bye, and take good care of yourself. Do enjoy the rest of the week.
Tune into the final take with MK Mariner every Saturday on the Alcamba Times and experience extensive conversations on a variety of topics, including national and international headlines, breaking issues, and major developments in politics, business, innovation, science, and sports, along with inspiring stories and expert analysis to provide a comprehensive understanding of the news.
At the end of the parade, President Jawara addressed the school children.
His theme this year was literacy.
As we observe 1990 as International Literacy Year, let us together, parents, teachers, and the Gambian community at large, as a first step, vouch to live up to the challenge of wiping out illiteracy by encouraging literacy in our homes, at the Bantaba, and in our different localities. Literacy opens up many opportunities for us, not only as individuals, but also as a nation. By developing the minds and skills of our people, they are not only increasing their chances to become worthy and responsible citizens, but we are also enhancing the development of the nation. Literacy is therefore crucial to the development of this nation's human resources. This is one of the challenges we faced in the 90s, and in this area, we owe a debt of gratitude to the international community, especially the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, whose partnership in this cause has been steadfast and encouraging. We count on their continued assistance in our efforts to build a solid human resource base that will ensure that our nation moves from strength to strength. You would recall that we have recently adopted a youth policy for the Gambia. By so doing, we have not only demonstrated the importance we attach to the development of our youth, but more so the major role youth must play in the development of our nation. I therefore appeal to you, boys and girls, to see yourselves not only as receivers from your nation, but also as givers to your nation. Your education, therefore, has an important role to play in both your self-development and national development. Your parents and guardians will tell you that even though we can boast of successes in the first 25 years of independence, it has not been without hardship and a good deal of self-sacrifice. If we ever hope to cope with and resolve the problems of this closing decade of the 20th century, and indeed prepare for the challenges of the 21st century, we must redouble our efforts within the framework of TAT. In concluding, I must commend you for the splendid turnout and thank you and thank your untiring teachers, parents and guardians, and the public at large for their continued support, understanding, and the sacrifices they have made to honor this memorable day, the 25th anniversary of our dear nation. Happy anniversary to you all. May God bless you.